All right. So, welcome to the Kubernetes monthly community meeting for January 2020. I have a couple of reminders for you before we get started. First things first, we are now being recorded. I believe. I don't see the little recording button, but I am assuming it's working. So, just as a reminder, we are being recorded. If you do not want to be on the recording, please do mute your video, mute your sound, and hopefully I don't sound too much like the corporate policy that I'm quoting. Also, a code of conduct is in effect for this meeting. In short, be awesome to each other. So, with that, I do want to say that my name is Laura Santa Maria. I am your host for today's community meeting. I'm from LogDNA. I'm a developer advocate, and I also work with the Contribex SIG, which we do contributor experience. If someone would be so kind as to be my note taker, if Google Docs wants to work with us today, we are having a little bit of issues with Google Docs. So if you're unable to get into it, don't worry. We will get the notes out to the mailing list in about 15 minutes after the meeting. So, all right. I believe I have someone doing notes somewhere else. So we're going to go with it and let's roll. So, first up, we're going to talk about the release updates. And Bob, I believe this is you. Take it away.
So I was just dropping a link in the chat. Hey, I'm Bob, or Bob Killner, Mr. Bobby Tables. I am a 118 release lead shadow. The big thing to keep in mind with regards to release is enhancements freeze. It's not too far away. I think it's just under 2 weeks at January 28th. So now's the time to make sure your KEPs meet all the criteria. So they have to be like an implementable state, have a test plan, and get everything nice and happy. Beyond that, I think most of their deadlines are a bit far out for now.
All right. And I believe there were some patch release update notes. So, just some notes that were left for us. The 1.17.1 release, it was out January 14th. The 1.16.5 release is coming today, January 16th. The 1.15.8 release is also coming out today on January 16th. Also, the 1.14.11 release coming today, January 16th, to fix an upgrade scenario for 1.15. A series of bugs have been identified in how the next beta tag is applied on these branches. For example, when v1.17.1 is tagged and released, we also mark the branch with the tag v.1.17.2-beta.0. The bug's root cause goes back many years in the design and implementation of the tool used to build and release, but they are partially corrected now. A complete fix will likely come first. And the next patch target releases is February 11th. So that's about it for the updates from the release team. Thank you so much, Bob. And now we're going to start with our SIG updates. The first person up is SIG Cloud Provider with Walter. Walter, are you on the call?
I'm on the call.
All right, take it away.
All right, sorry, switch to my slides. All right, so SIG Cloud Provider community meeting. I'm on my slides. You're welcome to join along or not. So we've promoted the node zone region topology labels to GA.
Can you share your slides
Yeah, that'd be great.
or share their screen?
Let me. Sorry, I will attempt to do exactly that. Yeah, I'm just gonna share. All right, everyone got my screen?
Perfect.
We've
Thank
got
you.
you.
Awesome. All right, so we promoted the node zone region topology labels to GA. Personally, I think if we had to do this again, I might do it slightly differently. As a result of this, we had to deprecate the old labels. So you'll notice that failure domain beta Kubernetes IO zone and failure domain beta Kubernetes IO region have been deprecated. The new versions do not contain the term beta. So just an FYI. We also got the API server network proxy code in conjunction with the API machinery SIG to alpha. The plan is to use this to replace the SSH tunnel code, which was deprecated over a year ago. And we've been working with the SIG storage team. We have a plan in conjunction with SIG storage to attempt to get cloud provider extraction in the CSI timelines to align with being done in the 1.21 release. So that is still a goal, but we at least have the aligned timelines. So plans for the upcoming cycles, since these meetings are now, you won't be hearing us again for like 6 months. We would like to bring the network proxy to GA and remove the SSH tunnels. We would like to extract the cloud provider dependency portion of the credential provider from kubelet. So we still need to get alignment with SIG node and SIG auth for that. We're trying to generate a controller migration lock mechanism to allow, primarily for HA environments, to allow controllers to migrate from one controller manager to another. Our use case is to go from the KCM to the CCM, that's the Kube Controller Manager, to the Cloud Controller Manager. But I know a lot of cloud providers run additional controller managers, and so we're trying to do it in a generic way that's good for everyone. With some help from the release team, we built support for providerless builds. This is primarily the ability to generate the Kube API server, the Kube Controller Manager, and the kubelet without any cloud provider code in it at all. So as an example, you would no longer see, if you don't have the AWS storage mechanisms compiled as something that you build on top of, you no longer get complaints that they weren't there in the Kube API server. So this is sort of the carrot we're extending to anyone who gets their in-tree code out of tree. And then we'd like to improve the tooling and documentation around Cloud Controller Manager to make it easier for cloud providers to extend it for themselves. And again, we're aiming for the 121 release. So how do these plans affect you? Well, the big thing is that in the 121 release, we'd like to be able to remove all of the cloud provider code. One of the effects of that is that most of the EDE tests are around cloud provider, and when the cloud providers are gone, that means that that pre-submit signal is going to disappear. So we need to come up with a good plan on how we work in that new world. So if there are no cloud provider EDE tests running, or at least they're all running post-submit, then we need to be able to answer questions like, how do we aggregate the test results? How do we identify breaking changes? Who fixed the breakages? When do we do rollbacks? And do we have any policies like how many cloud providers need to be affected before we do a rollback? If you're interested in any particular cloud provider, here are all of the repos that I'm aware of. And all of them could use help getting their out of tree code solid and working. If you are aware of a cloud provider who isn't on this list, then they're not an in-tree already, but we're certainly happy to help them work with the new mechanisms that we've been putting in place. Yeah, just quick rundown for the various cloud provider sub-project statuses. AWS thinks that they can have their open source solution to alpha in the 118 release. As a little more on the hopeful side, or hoping side, maybe I should put it, are the Azure GCP releases. IBM is targeting 117 for their managed service, but they don't actually have a plan yet for the open source. And I believe OpenStack and vSphere managed to get something into what they're calling 1.0, which I assume is their GA. So they're a little ahead of everyone else, which is awesome. Thank you. All right, I've got a list of all the caps. Predominantly, these caps are about doing the cloud provider extraction. So if you have questions on any of the implementation details, I strongly recommend taking a look at these caps. Most of them are under cloud provider, although the network proxy is under API machinery. There are some caps coming. The credential provider extraction effort, which I think we're on our third run through with Node and auth. The CCM migration's a little more solid. I think that one's going to go without a problem. And then there's a new proposal for Node shutdown. Also, there's a new cloud provider template for anyone that is a new cloud provider. So please fill in that clip and we'll go ahead and get you the repo. Our related working group status. So cloud provider extraction is the big working group we're running right now. We're trying to get the 121 effort. The CCM migration is green. The network proxy right now is green. The credential provider I've marked as yellow just because we still haven't finalized on an alpha version of the CAP and we're running out of time. How can you contribute? So the best thing to do is to probably go to the cloud provider issues. If you have particular interest in the API proxy server, that has its own, and I definitely would recommend taking a look at that. That's kind of specialized networking, but if you're interested, please help us out. And other than that, we are happy to help teach you about cloud provider issues, cloud provider interfaces, and how we try to maintain uniformity of cloud providers for Kubernetes. Andrew Sykim and myself are monitoring Slack. Please just come in, ask. We have a very welcoming group. We have a lot of other people, Chris Hoge, Yassine, Steve Wong, who also drop in, and we're happy to help. So please reach out to us. And as far as finding us, Andrew is Andrew Sykim on just about everything. He's at VMware. I'm Chef Taco on most things. I work for Google. We have a SIG cloud provider page. We have 3 Slack channels. We have the general cloud provider Slack channel if you have cloud provider questions. If you're interested in API server network proxy, go ahead and on that Slack, it's a pretty small but very welcoming team. And if you're interested in anything to do with helping get the in-tree cloud providers out of tree, we have a specific Slack channel, cloud provider extraction for that. So please reach out and chat with us. And that's what I have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Walter, for a really great overview and a great update. Up next, we have SIG auto scaling with Marcin. I believe I pronounced your name right.
Yes, correct. Hello, everyone. I don't have slides, but I will try to be quick. Just a quick reminder what SIG autoscaling does. We are responsible for horizontal pod autoscaler, which adds and removes your pods according to the traffic, for vertical pod autoscaler, which makes your pods bigger and smaller depending on their CPU and memory usage, and cluster autoscaler, which adds and removes nodes to your cluster. So in the last half a year, in cluster autoscaler, we have been switching to scheduling framework, which will go live with switch, which will go live in 1.18. It will improve a lot of corner cases where cluster autoscaler has not been doing a great job, like anti-affinity and zone-specific storage. We also added support for various stained node conditions, and we improved performance and scalability. We also onboarded yet another cloud provider, which is Packet. In VPA, we have been mostly working on bug fixes, and we are graduating the API to GA. In HPA, the biggest change is the expansion of the API. We are adding a way to control how fast and how much you scale up and down, and these changes should get live in 1.18. Moreover, recently we also added support for scale to 0, which is flag gated, as it is a breaking change. So if you want to scale your deployments to 0, you need to set an extra flag. Apart from that, we did quite a number of bug fixes recently. And that will be all from the update.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the update. And onward we go to SIG scheduling with Abdullah, who is already sharing your screen. Thank you so much. And go ahead and take it away.
Thanks. Let me just try to present. Can you guys see my screen?
We can see it. Looks great.
Okay.
Yep.
Hi everyone, my name is Abdullah. I'm co-chair of SIG scheduling, and here's our update. So what we did in our last cycle is the following. The first thing is, as some of you might know, we've been working on refactoring the core scheduler around what we call a scheduling framework, which is basically an execution engine with a predefined number of extension points. Those extension points allows you to implement new behavior in the scheduler out of tree. So those extension points, you can, in these extension points, you can register, for example, callbacks, and a group of callbacks basically constitute a plugin. For example, pod affinity, we will have a bunch of, it's implemented at multiple extension points, the filtering as well as the scoring, and so on. So the scheduling framework was proposed about a year ago. In the last cycle, we finished the implementation of the framework itself, but we didn't have any plugins implemented in it. So in the last cycle, what we did, we wrapped existing predicates and priorities as plugins. So in the scheduler, we are deprecating the concept of predicate and priority. They will be transforming into plugins. And so all the predicates and priorities have been wrapped around around plugins that are now being executed in the framework. And what we did was we maintained the old execution path for predicates and priorities. It's just for like as a backup plan in case things didn't go well. And what we did also, we already have what we call like a policy API, configuration API. It's a V1 API, so we can't remove that. So we built a translation layer if a scheduler is being given a policy file with the list of predicates and priorities that should be executed in the scheduler. We have that translation layer that basically translate them into plugins. So that was all done in 1.17. We've also done a bunch of performance improvements. The most important one was improving pod scheduling latency by approximately 2x, excluding the binding on large scale clusters. And the other improvement was focused on affinity. We know that affinity is not as performant as we would hope for, partially because of the flexible API that we have, where we always need to look at global state to make a decision where the pod should land. But we've discovered a number of low-hanging fruits. Plus, we changed a little bit the data structure that's used to implement this feature, and we managed to get around 4x improvement in the preferred pod affinity. We also spent a lot of effort in improving observability in the scheduler. We added new metrics around scheduling latency, also traffic, how many pods, for example, being queued and dequeued from our from the scheduling queue, saturation metrics, for example, how many Go binding routines being spawned at a time, etc. We have a couple of features that graduated to GA in 1.17. Scheduled daemon set pods. In the past, the daemon set controller was actually doing the scheduling of daemon set pods. Now the daemon set controller is just creating the pod, and the scheduler is the one that actually scheduling them. So that makes it a little bit more consistent in how we assign pods to nodes. The other feature is taint nodes by condition. Again, this feature is graduated to GA, and basically what this does is the node lifecycle controller monitors the nodes and taints them, and then the scheduler decides whether or not to schedule pods on those nodes based on those taints, instead of actually looking at specific status of the node, like memory pressure, etc. Also, we gave a couple of KubeCon talks, an introduction by Wei and Ravi, and I gave a deep dive on the scheduler. So plans for upcoming cycles. Again, as I mentioned, we wrapped existing predicates and priorities around plugins. What we've been doing in 1.18 is basically completely getting rid of the predicates priorities code and all the execution path. And also remove external dependencies on predicates. For example, cluster autoscaler, as Marcin just mentioned, it was depending directly on the predicates. They were executing them directly. So we provided them with a more with a nicer, let's say, interface to integrate with the scheduler. Basically, now they just need to create a what we call a framework, and they can specify the list of plugins that they want to execute in the autoscaler to make decisions on whether to autoscale or downscale. It's basically probably is going to be the list of filter plugins. We've also cleaned up the dependency on the daemon set controller, partially because we graduated node taint conditions to GA. We still have one dependency in kubelet that we would like to clean up as well. We are hoping that probably in 1.19, we will declare the policy API deprecated once we have component config graduated to GA. So component config will have the plugins API where we can specify and define the new behavior of the scheduler. As I mentioned, the policy API is centered around predicates and priorities, which now do not exist basically in the core scheduler. So a new feature that will be coming in the next the next cycles is what we call multi-config scheduler. So right now, you can only provide a single configuration of how the scheduler behaves. So what we would like to do is to allow creating a scheduler with more than one plugin configuration. So you can specify in the pod spec the scheduler name. The scheduler name will be mapped to a specific configuration. And that would allow you, for example, to create a scheduler that caters for a mix of workloads. For example, if you have within the same cluster, you have workloads that are like batch oriented and service oriented. So you can tune you have two different configurations that are tuned for these two types of workloads. As I mentioned, we are hoping also to finish the integration with the autoscaler with the new interface. And then we also would like to further improve the scheduler performance. We continue to do profiling. We have new benchmarks that will be posted on Perf dashboard to monitor the scheduler performance. And last but not least, we would like to graduate topology spread to beta. One more thing, leadership position changes. So last time, I guess when we gave an update, it was Bobby. Bobby stepped down as a co-chair of the SIG, and me, Abdullah Garaibi, I took over. Where to find us? So co-chairs are myself and Klaus Ma. You can find our GitHub handles on the slides, the Slack channel, and the list of the Google groups, and the list of issues that are available for if anyone would like to pick up and help. And that's all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Abdullah, very much. And congratulations on taking over as co-chair. All right. Up next, we have, last but not least, SIG scalability. And that's going to be Matt. So
Yep.
Matt, if you are on the call, there you are. Go ahead and take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Matt. I'm one of the chairs of SIG scalability. Let me present the presentation. Can you see it?
We can see it. Go right ahead.
Perfect. All right. Sorry about that. All right. So what did we do last cycle? One big area of scalability is our performance and scale test. So basically ensuring that Kubernetes scales. We extended our load test to exercise more Kubernetes resources like daemon sets, stateful sets, persistent volume secrets. As of today, they are continuously scale tested, both in pre-submit and also in continuous test in a clusters up to 5,000 nodes. When it comes to cluster loader, which is our flagship tool for running load tests, we improved it a bit, implemented a few new features like test suites. We now detect crash looping components, and we are working on adding HA support, so supporting cluster with multiple masters. This is partially implemented. There are like still a few things to improve. We also invested a bit in making our pre-submits more reliable. That included migrating them to Boscos, also like making them a bit faster and cheaper. We added more tests in release branches because we realized we previously didn't run like full set of our tests there. Our tests were mostly run on the master branch. Now we run exactly the same sets also on release branches. And last but not least, we've been experimenting with some pod throughput tests, comparing containerd versus Docker. Right, another important part of our SIG is guarding against performance regressions. So one thing here is that we introduced the scalability approval process. This is part of the production readiness effort. We worked close with the Golang team to validate the Golang 1.13 release. It contained some performance regressions, but together with the Golang folks, we managed to figure out everything and fix everything. So as of Kubernetes 1.17, Golang 1.13 is used. And also there's a link to this document with all since I think November. That's when we started maintaining this document with all the regression and bugs. Yeah, so and I'm interested, you can take a look. I think that we have like over 10 regressions there. Yeah, and when it comes to improvements we've made to the Kubernetes, so some examples here. One is the watch serialization mechanism improvements. Basically, I think as of 1.17, there is only one serialization happening across all watchers of the same resource. Some example here is the use case of, for example, kubeproxys watching endpoints. Before that change, when there was like endpoint change, it's being sent to all the nodes, and for each node it was serialized separately, and that had a big impact on performance. So now only one serialization happens, and in the I think in the PR we can find more details about the exact numbers, but it was a biggie. Other thing is core components improvement. So we take a look at them and improve a lot. Examples here are node lifecycle controller, garbage collector controller, and taint manager. Basically, all of these changes translate to much more stable clusters, especially during up phase and also when scaling them up or down. Some of the changes, I think that was the taint manager, was really good, and we cherry picked that into 1.14 and 1.15. Other thing, watch bookmarks are in GA. I think during the last update we said that they were beta. We opened a cap for immutable secrets. There is work in progress on that. And yeah, last but not least, even more cheaper node heartbeats. So as of 1.17, I believe we reduced the frequency of node object updates from 5 minutes to 1 minute. Yep. So plans for upcoming cycles. We hope to work more on improving the scalability definition. So, finalizing existing work in progress scalability SLI, SLOs, things like network programming latency, network latency. We already measured that in tests, but we need to come up with the SLO definition, so guarantee some threshold, and analyze the data we have and basically come up with some threshold that will guarantee. Updating scalability envelope, so adding more dimensions there, updating the thresholds. Some of them are out of date a bit. For example, like number of services, number of pods per service that you can have that change dramatically with endpoint slices and stuff like that. And in general, work on hardening and extending this definition. When it comes to scalability and performance tests, we would like to cover even more Kubernetes resources in addition to what I listed before. We would like to make KubeMark, which is our tool for simulating clusters that we use in our scale test, to make it even more cheaper and better, meaning more close to what real clusters are. And we would like to invest a bit more in other types of tests, in test scenarios that we are currently not exercising. So for example, AJ testing, some upgrade testing, chaos testing, and some pathological scenarios testing. For example, like, I don't know, one master goes down and what happens in that case, and stuff like that. And when it comes to bottleneck detection and performance improvements, so basically finishing existing stuff, looking for more, as always. There is Golang 114. I think currently it's in beta, but the release is coming closer. We are already working with Golang team on validating the release in terms of performance. Yeah, I think there is a wrong link. I will fix that. Yeah, implementing immutable secrets that I mentioned before. There is also a cap from etcd folks to use progress notify feature and implement consistent reads from cache. We are working on scale testing that, and if we manage to get it in 118, that will be a biggie for the scalability and performance. Right, and how these plans affect you. So when it comes to scalability approval process, this is still like in experimental phase. We will be looking for CAP owners to help with validation. We will be reaching out also to more people in the community and then users of Kubernetes to understand what they really want in terms of extending our scalability SLIs and SLOs, what is important to them. And one watch out, we had a big regression in 117, and 117.0 is vulnerable to that. That's a regression that if you have a large enough cluster and something happens to your master that results in restarting API server, for example, you do an upgrade of the master, the cluster will break. So it's fixed in 117.1. And if you want to use large cluster, we recommend not using 170.0, starting from 117.1. If you want to help us, you are more than welcome. We have some help wanted lists where we tag good first issues, both on perf tests and on Kubernetes repos. If you need anything, just ping us on SIG Scalability Slack channel. Yeah, that's the list of current chairs and TLs, and links to our homepage, Slack channel, mailing list. And we also have public meetings. I encourage you to join if you want to learn more about scalability. They're happening bi-weekly, every Thursday. We had one today, so next one will be in 2 weeks. And that's everything. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. And that's the end of all of our SIG updates. I want to say a big thank you to all of the SIG presenters for keeping to 10 minutes because it really helps us keep this meeting rolling. Because we're having trouble with the Google Docs, I'm going to make a call for announcements, and I'm actually going to start because someone pinged me with an update. If you're liking or hating this new format, please do let the SIG for contributor experience know. Come find us in Slack. We're trying to balance getting some information out of everyone's busy schedule and not overloading everybody with meetings. So if this works for you, please let us know how useful it was for you. So that's an update from the contributor experience SIG. Any other updates, announcements that people would like to make?
I think check the chat. There's a contributor survey regarding the contributor survey.
Yep, the contributor survey is out. Please do fill that out. Do you know when the deadline is? 24 hours,
I think
Paris,
it's
just let me know.
24 hours.
And we will share a link when I can find it. So go ahead. Anyone else? Other updates? All right. Okay, thank you so much for posting that. The link is in the Zoom group chat. And also there is a contributor summit. Supposedly there's this thing going on for EU. Go ahead and take a look at the dev channel for all of the information about that. All right. And with that, just as a note, also because it is an entire month's worth of shout outs, we're not going to read the shout outs anymore out on this. So I'm actually going to give you guys about 25 minutes back of your time. Thank you so much for joining us for the community. Please have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks all.